I would like to invite Scott Ambler, the founder of the discipline Agile Delivery and the former chief methodologist in IBM, to deliver the keynote. Scott will be talking about harmonizing lean and agile. Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for taking time out of your busy days to come to this event today. So as we've heard, there's a great lineup of speakers today. So I'm very excited. I'll be here all day as well. So what I would like to talk about today is, what does a disciplined agile enterprise look like? How does agile and lean work in large organizations, so Fortune 500 and government agencies? So in some cases, some of the customers that you're currently working with, some of the organizations that you're working with, or perhaps maybe organizations that you'll be working with someday. So for some of you, I appreciate that there's a range of people here today, that some of you are working for smaller companies, some of you are working for larger companies. So I'm speaking today about what's going on in these larger enterprise class organizations. So this may or may not be direct applicability to you today, but someday it will be. Because as we're seeing, and I'm going to share some industry stats with you today, but as we're seeing, Agile is being implemented in organizations around the world, in all domains, in all sizes of organization, from very small to very large. So Agile is in fact the future, and this is easy to say because I'm a firm believer that the future is here today. So these are easy things to observe if you choose to. So we've got a bunch of wonderful sponsors here, so I'd like to take the opportunity to thank them as well, again, because without sponsors like this, conferences like this simply can't exist. The economics just aren't there. So before we begin, I would like to just a little bit of introduction stuff. So first of all, my goal is to get you thinking outside of the box. So if you are brand new to Agile, then certainly this entire day will get you thinking outside of the box. If you are familiar just with Scrum, then this will definitely get you thinking outside of the box. So I'm gonna get you thinking way beyond the actual narrow and prescriptive confines that we find with Scrum, and because I'm gonna talk about scaling and good things like that. If you're a developer, I'm going to talk about issues that those evil managers are concerned about, or those evil data management people, or enterprise architects. We're gonna look beyond the programming box because this is critical. I'm a firm believer in if you want to successfully do an agile transformation, the entire organization needs to become agile, needs to become lean, not just the programmers. And if you don't look at the big picture, and if you don't know how to transition these various groups in IT, these various groups in your businesses, and do it in such a way that makes sense for them, then you will run into trouble. And we're seeing more and more agile transformations these days running into trouble because, yes, the development teams are happy, but all these teams surrounding them are not happy. The project management folks are not happy, the data management folks are not happy, the enterprise architects aren't happy. So if you don't transform all of these groups in a coherent manner, then you're going to run into trouble. So in many ways, this talk is about what is the big picture here for these large organizations? What are the types of issues that we're dealing with? And if you happen to be working for a small or a medium-sized organization today, well, tomorrow you might be a large organization because most companies want to grow. They want to grow and be successful. So the issue, you might not be dealing with some of these issues today, but a few years from now, you might be. So please just keep that in mind. I'm going to share some survey data. So I do industry-level research, almost always in the form of surveys, because I'm a firm believer in fact-based discussions. I want to talk about what people are actually doing as opposed to what people are claiming that they're doing. And what you'll find is that some of the discussions that you see in discussion forums coming from self-appointed gurus are much different than what they actually do in practice. There's a lot of wishful thinking. There's a lot of rhetoric out there. There's a lot of fantasy. If only the planets all aligned, this is the way we would work. And then you start, you take them out for a few drinks perhaps, and you start finding out what they're actually doing in practice. And sometimes it's very different. And what I found is that some of the Sometimes the discussions that occur in these discussion forums are very different. And when you get people in private and you ask them, so what are you doing on your project right now today? Please describe what's going on. It's a very different picture than what they're talking about. Because in the Agile community, there's certain things that are very cool. It's very cool to be collaborative. It's very cool to do test-driven development. It's very cool to do DevOps and other things, which is great. But it's not so cool to talk about, well, here's how we approach modeling. It's not so cool to talk about, here's how we do governance or documentation. And yet we're still doing these things. So I'm a firm believer in looking at the big picture, and let's streamline all of this stuff. Because this modeling and documentation and governance and many other issues, they are important. And we want to leverage that. We want to get good at it. And we want to be as good as we possibly can be as a team, as professionals, as organizations. And the only way we can do that is by looking at the bigger picture and discussing honestly what we're doing, honestly what's happening. So anyways, I'm going to share some data with you, and this will also be a get you thinking outside of the box type of a thing as well. So what story am I going to tell today? So first of all, I'm going to begin by talking about the Agile enterprise. So an Agile enterprise is able to react quickly to changes in the marketplace, changes in the situation. Because as we see in the news all the time, it's changing. The business environment changes, the political environment changes. I'm from a country called Canada, and I don't know if the only Canadian news you've probably heard this year is the Toronto mayor, the city I'm from, is on crack. And the second thing you've probably heard about Canada is that our parliament was shot up last week by some crazy dude with a gun. Now, the crazy dude, now both of those things are very unusual for Canada. Having a crack-smoking mayor is not normal for us. And having our parliament shot up, or having any sort of shootings whatsoever, is not normal for us. So this one event last week of a crazy gunman doing what he was doing has completely changed the political setting in Canada. We're rethinking physical security. We're rethinking what it means to honestly be Canadian now, because this is not normal for us. So I think we need to, and that just changed out of the blue. So there's been some very severe shocks in the Canadian market just in this last few days. So this happens. So an Agile enterprise needs to be able to react to these sorts of things, needs to be reactive, and needs to be prepared to be flexible enough to deal with them. So this is, and it's obviously not just a shooting thing or a crack smoking thing, but in the business environment we see changes all the time too. But to support an Agile enterprise, we need an Agile IT department. The entire IT department needs to be Agile, needs to be lean. Not just the programmers, not just the development teams. It's great that the development teams can be Agile, but that's not the full picture. We have the data management folks, we have operations, we have support, we have portfolio management, we have enterprise architecture, many other things in these enterprise class companies. So the enterprise architects need to work in an Agile manner, the data management people need to work in an Agile manner, and so on. So we need to look at the bigger picture. And in the IT space, we often talk about three aspects of IT: plan, build, and run. So development, software development is part of build. One of the aspects of build, obviously a very important aspect of IT, but it's not the only aspect of IT. And it's not where most of the money gets spent either, which is interesting in general. Now, it'd be nice if we could spend more money in development, but certainly it's not where, new development is not where we spend most of our money in IT. It's actually in operations and support and in maintenance of existing systems. So when we start looking at the bigger picture, we really need to be Agile across the entire IT department and not just in one small aspect of it, build. And then finally, for Agile IT to work, we need Agile development, obviously. So this is what the focus of the Agile community has been for many, many years. Let's get really good at software development, which is great, that's important, but it's certainly not the full picture. So we need to look at the full picture, be a little more expansive in our scope. So let's explore several questions. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the current state of Agile actually is. Sometimes the picture is better or worse than what you might have been told, so we'll see what that is. I'll focus a little more on Agile Enterprise. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about Agile IT, This is some new work in the DAD community. So I'm actually going to show you some material that has not yet been published yet. So this quarter, so till the end of the year, we'll be publishing a lot of the material that I'm referring to in these slides today. And then finally, we'll talk about what does it mean, what does actually Agile delivery look like? And it's certainly not what you're hearing from the Scrum folks. And finally, we'll talk about a little bit of transition stuff, and I'll share some data from there. So what's the current state of Agile? So the good news is the vast majority of organizations or of development teams now are in fact doing Agile or some form of Agile or Lean. So we're seeing a little over half are talking about Agile, 7% are claiming to be Lean, and 19% are claiming to be iterative. So I would say that, and very few are traditional now these days. So we see a little bit of hackers. So maybe a quarter are either hacking or working in a traditional heavy manner these days. But it's certainly nice to see that a lot of teams are working are predominantly Agile now. And I should say this, so this is a Dr. Dobbs, a Dr. Dobbs survey, research coming from Dr. Dobbs. And Dr. Dobbs has a very representative readership of the IT industry. So, and what's more interesting is they tend to lean towards traditional, or at least they used to tend to lean towards traditional. And now we're seeing some very clear evidence that that Agile is pretty much winning the game. So I suspect these numbers are going to get even better. But what's also interesting is we're still seeing roughly 20% of all teams are still doing some sort of iterative process, maybe the rational unified process or RAD from the 80s. So they're not quite Agile yet. But so I suspect that this segment here will become more and more Agile as time goes on. We're also seeing organizations being reasonably successful. So 44% are claiming either they're having great success with Agile or at least they're successful. But only 40% say, "Ooh, we're not quite sure. We're not, we might be successful, we might not. It's not hurting us, but we're certainly not seeing these huge benefits we keep hearing about." And only a very small percentage are running into trouble. 6% are saying that they're failing at Agile. So it is possible to fail at these transformations. We're seeing some evidence of that, but it's, for the most part, it's either a very good story or a neutral story. So the implication for organizations, if you haven't moved to Agile yet, or if you're thinking about it, on average, this is a fairly low-risk proposition. So this is something to consider. We're also seeing, so one of my jobs, when I was at IBM, I got to go to organizations around the world to see what they were doing and to help them out and do strategy and sometimes do assessments and all that good sort of stuff. So I had the privilege of getting a pretty good handle on what the actual status was, what was actually working and what was not working. And some of the observations we made was that Agile was being applied at scale. So we were seeing teams, Agile teams, very small Agile teams, 2, 3, 4 people, but we were also seeing Agile programs of several hundred people, and anywhere in between. So this is obviously a spectrum. We were seeing Agile teams working in a geographic distributed manner. What's interesting is one of the myths in the Agile community is that we're doing co-located development. Only the minority of Agile teams, now this is a very good idea, don't get me wrong. I love doing co-located development, but it's a bit of a myth. A minority of Agile teams are doing co-located development. The majority of them are geographically distributed in some way. So if you have people working in cubicles or in offices on the same floor, you're geographically distributed. You've erected barriers to communication, cube walls or real walls. Your success rate goes down by several percentage points just by having people working in cubicles as opposed to an open office space. And this is empirically easy to measure if you choose to. Let alone if you got people working in different buildings, maybe a few people working from home, or different cities across the planet. The more distributed you are, your success rate your risk is going up, so your success rate goes down. Pretty basic stuff. But we are seeing teams being successful at globally distributed development. We see organization distribution as well. Some of you are living in this reality right now, where your organization is maybe somebody's outsourcing work to your company, or maybe you're a larger company and you're outsourcing to somebody else, or maybe you're partnering with somebody else. So we're seeing all levels of organization distribution, from the simple situation of everybody working for a single division of the same company to multiple divisions of the same company to multiple companies in partnership to outsourcing. And obviously, wherever you are on that spectrum, you'll be working in a different manner. So this is another interesting observation to make, is that Agile teams are in every team is in a unique situation. And every team works differently as a result. So a team of 5 people will work differently than a team of 20, than a team of 50, than a team of 500. I think that should be blatantly obvious. A team that is all co-located in the same room will work differently than a team in cubicles, than a team that's spread across the planet. A team that's working for the same company will work very differently than a team that's doing outsourcing. So different teams in different situations need to work in different ways. So these one-size-fit-all methodologies that are prescriptive, that say this is the official way of doing things, are problematic. Because it might work really well for a small co-located team working for the same company, but it certainly won't work for a very large team that's spread across the planet. So different situations require different approaches. So you need to be flexible. So as professionals, as Agilists, we need to be flexible in our methodology. We need to be flexible in our team structure. We need to be flexible in our tooling structure. So for example, a co-located team, you'll do most of your modeling on whiteboards and paper because you're all in the same room. A team that's spread across the planet will need, some sort of modeling tools and some sort of electronic tools like Jira or something else in order to manage themselves. Different teams in different situations. So keep that in mind. Sometimes we have regulatory compliance. So on the easy end of the spectrum, no compliance at all. But roughly 1/3 of all Agile teams have some form of regulatory compliance. In the middle ground, we might have financial compliance, like Sarbanes-Oxley or the Basel standards. And at the other end of the spectrum, we might have life-critical compliance. We might have in the automotive sector, we've got the ISO 26262 standard. In the medical device community, we have all the FDA standards, all the FDA regulations. So a team that's building a heart monitor will work in a very different manner than a team that's building a website because of regulatory concerns. And we have all ranges of domain complexity. So we might have some very simple systems like Hello World or a simple informational website. In the middle ground, we might have a financial processing system. And at the high end, we might have an air traffic control system. So obviously a team building an air traffic control system will work in a slightly more sophisticated manner than a team that's building Hello World. And then finally, we have technical complexity. It's interesting. All these books that get written, they always seem to assume that we're building a brand new silo application that doesn't have to integrate with anything using brand new technologies. I have never seen that in the real world. I hear rumors of this. I have never actually seen it, right? What I see we've got multiple platforms to support. We've got legacy code out there that we have to integrate with. We've got legacy code out there that we have to fix. We've got legacy data sources that we have to integrate with. We've got legacy data sources that we have to fix. And all running on different platforms, using different technologies. Sometimes the tools in the COBOL world aren't quite as good as what we see in the Ruby world, for example, right? So, and as developers, we've got to deal with all this sort of stuff because that's the environment that we're in. And this is particularly true if you're a consulting or a contracting company because you get plunged into the environment of your customer and it's always a mess. That's why you're there, because it's a mess and you're trying to fix the problem. So every single team will be somewhere on all these 6 factors, right? So you'll be somewhere in the spectrum here. Different teams will be in different situations, so you got to do different things. When I present this to senior management in most companies, the only response I get is, "Oh, we've got all of this." I know you've got all of this because you've got multiple teams. So, and this is another implication. So, for the management folks in the audience, this is another harsh observation. So, you've got different teams in different situations. So, as management, you need to govern and support them differently. You will support a 5-person team differently than a 50-person team. You will support a team in a regulatory situation differently than a team in a non-regulatory situation. Okay? So if you've got 30 or 40 project teams or 300 or 400 project teams in flight, you've got a very serious governance problem. You've got a very serious management problem there because you've got to work with these teams in different ways. If you're the enterprise architecture team, I have to work with a small Agile team differently than a large Agile team, differently than a traditional team, differently than a lean team. So this makes enterprise architecture hard. This is the reality that we face in the IT world. We've got to be flexible. We've got to be prepared to collaborate in different manners depending on the situations we find ourselves in. So is this actually happening? This is from some research we did just a while ago, basically asking, so regardless of paradigm, so the way you read this chart is the blue is all teams, so it includes traditional and lean and agile and iterative, and the greenish color is just agile. And what I find interesting in this is we see in a few cases, agile teams on average are bigger than average teams. So even though we have a lot of rhetoric around small teams, which is good, in practice, the average agile team is slightly bigger on average than non-agile teams. We're all another interesting thing. We're all dealing with compliancy issues. We're all dealing with domain complexity as well. This is actually very interesting. On average, agile teams are dealing with harder problems now than what we see in the non-agile world, which I think is interesting. Because agile is all about dealing with complexity. It's all about flexibility. It's all about time to market. And agile is much better at dealing with complexity than traditional. Traditional is actually quite fragile. It's not so good at dealing with complexity. And in practice, organizations seem to be figuring that out. And what's also interesting is statistically, we're all dealing with the same levels of complexity of technology because we're all dealing with legacy stuff. Because it doesn't really matter, you're in your environment. Whatever your environment is what it is. And if you're agile, if you're traditional, or you're lean, or you're doing something else, you're still dealing with that environment. You're still dealing with all this legacy stuff. So the surveys are finding this as well. So some of the common problems that we're seeing moving to agile, we're seeing, the organization culture is probably the biggest problem. We see all this, bureaucratic, document-driven, very difficult cultures to work in. We're seeing, still seeing different goals in the IT world as opposed to the rest of the business. So this can be a bit of a problem. We're seeing, little support for learning and for experimentation. It's interesting, having in the lean community, we talk about running experiments all the time. Let's run a little experiment, get into production, see what happens. Try having that discussion with the vice president of a business division. You're going to run an experiment in production? Are you kidding? What are you talking? What are you smoking? Are you the mayor of Toronto? Things like that. And in flexible governance, we still, in most organizations, are governed very poorly. The governance people are completely ungoverned. One of my favorite questions to ask when I go into a company is, how are you governing the governance effort? And it's like deer caught in headlights. They have no idea what you're talking about because the governance people are completely and utterly out of control. They have no metrics. They have no way to measure what the heck it is that they're doing, which is why they're so messed up. A very serious problem. So the very first thing I do is let's get the governance folks let's start governing the governance people, and let's start inflicting some of their processes on themselves and see how they like it. Ooh, that's not fair. You get a lot of pushback on that one. What do you mean we got to be governed? What do you mean we got to justify our existence? Bad news. So interesting stuff going on in these agile enterprises. So let's assume for a few minutes, because this is an agile conference, let's assume that agile software development is in fact at the center of the universe. Because how could it not be? How could it not be, right? So anyways, so we see this agile, this scrum, this agile and lean stuff is a great start. Bunch of good ideas there. Let's be self-organizing. Good focus on construction. Let's be value-driven. So we're going to work we're going to prioritize all the work in business value order, or we're going to work in that order. All good ideas. Great start. So disciplined agile delivery ups the game a bit. Instead of worrying just about construction, let's take a look at delivery. How do we start a project? How do we transition into production? Those are interesting questions. Let's look at the full picture from end to end from the point of view of a project team. Being value-driven is great, but we should also consider risk as well, because there are business risks that we should get rid of right away. There are technical risks that we should pay down right away. So we should prove the architecture with working code, for example. That's a concept straight out of the Rational Unified process. It's also a concept that got adopted by the XP community in the mid-2000s. Self-organization is great, but there should be some adult supervision. There should be some governance going on. Because somebody is governing you. Most teams have to justify their existence. Most teams have to have some sort of a budget. They've got to do some estimating. They've got to provide some sort of good value to the organization. They've got to, somebody's going to keep an eye on the quality. Somebody's going to be keeping an eye on what's being delivered. This is all about governance. There's going to be roles and responsibilities. That's an aspect of governance. Somebody's going to have some metrics, be gathering some metrics. That's an aspect of governance. And wouldn't it be nice if the governance was effective? It's easy to, we can complain about senior management all we want and, those evil, stupid senior managers. Well, no, they're smart people doing the best they possibly can in the situation they find themselves in. So let's help them govern us better. Let's help them understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. Let's help them help us. Because that's what good governance is all about. Good governance is all about helping teams, helping the people do the right thing. They just might not know what the right thing is because of a different mindset and different experiences and stuff like that. Oh, and let's get rid of the prescription. One of the challenges that we see in the Agile world, regardless of the marketing rhetoric, it's very prescriptive. There's one way of doing things. And it's really sort of, we've seen some serious damage actually in the industry as a result of that. Most people's idea of modeling now is, let's write user stories. That's great, but that's only one very small aspect. It's only one of many model types you might want to consider. In the Scrum world, we've only got one way of managing changing requirements. It's a good way, but it's only one of many options. So let's get rid of some of the prescriptions. So let's become goal-driven. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then finally, once we get good at delivering end-to-end in fairly straightforward situations, then let's start trying to run. Let's start taking on the harder situations. Let's start taking on these large teams and greater complexity and stuff like that. So that's looking at it from a process point of view, but then we've got to look at it from an organizational point of view. So as individuals, we have to be able to work at whatever level of complexity, whatever level of situation we find ourselves in. So if we find ourselves on a large team that's regulated, that's geographically distributed, as an individual, I need to work in a manner that reflects that. I need to have the skills to get the job done in that situation. Similarly, my team has to figure out how we're going to organize ourselves, how we're going to work together to get the job done in the situation that my team faces. And then your team, in a different situation, is going to have to figure out how you're going to address your situation. The IT departments need to be able to figure this out. We've got all these different teams in different situations trying to accomplish different things. So the IT groups need to organize themselves in such a way to reflect that situation. And hopefully they're as agile as possible. Because if you want to really kill an agile transformation, all it really takes is one of the IT groups to refuse to become agile. The PMO doesn't want to become agile because they're PMI compliant. The data management group doesn't want to become agile because they're DAMA compliant. Right? So I can pick on any of the IT groups, and it's the same. All it takes is one of them, and it's like throwing sand into the gears. Right? So all of these groups need to become more agile and more lean over time. Some of these groups have a little bit of guidance, a little bit of help. Some of them don't. So in the project management community, we're seeing some good support for Agile. It's still it's early days. It's not perfect, but they're going in the right direction. In the data community, not so much. We're seeing a little bit of movement in the BI data warehousing field, but that's about it. The rest of the data management community is still in the 1970s. And that's a serious problem in most organizations. And most organizations have even given up now on the data stuff. They just accept their poor data quality. They just accept the fact that the data management crowd has almost no capability whatsoever to move fast. And that literally is like throwing sand in the gears. So this is probably a problem. And at the organization level, the business needs to start rethinking things. These annual budgeting processes are questionable at best. Yeah, it keeps the accountants busy, but really, does the organization exist to employ financial people? I don't think so, right? So they've got these weird, all it takes to kill a project, an IT project these days, is for a business person to come along and say, I need to know the exact budget, I need to know exactly how long it's going to take, and I need to know exactly what you're going to deliver. Right? You've just killed the project. And they're trying to minimize, and these are good, smart people, they're trying to minimize risk, but they have no freaking clue what the impact is of that decision. It sounds like a good idea to them, but they don't understand the behavior that it's going to cause for you, right? And then bad things are going to happen, and of course it'll be the IT people's fault. Wouldn't be their fault. They set you up for failure, they don't know it, and then you fail, and then it must have been your fault, right? So the business needs to change too. So what does an Agile IT department look like? So as I was saying, it's very common in the IT community to talk about plan, build, run. So plan is all about, let's think through, what are we trying to achieve over the next couple of years or next few months, depending on what your planning horizons are. Build is all about, well, building software, doing release management, good stuff like that. And run is all about, what do we need to do to keep the lights on? How do we operate and support all this IT infrastructure that we've got? Now, these are numbers I've sort of combined from various research over the years. So Gartner's got their versions of these numbers, and Forrester's got their version, and other people got their version. But it all sort of boils down to, and your mileage may vary in your company, but it's common to see, roughly 10% of the IT budget, roughly, being spent on planning activities, planning and management activities. We're seeing, 20% on new build, on new software development. So the stuff the Agile community focuses on, it's only about 20% on average of the IT budgets. And we see about 70% of the IT budget being spent on sustainment, on operations, and on support. And if you've been around the block a few times in the IT community, for decades now, we've had this story. Any management consultant gets on stage, and we'll always talk about, well, if we can only become more efficient at IT, if we can only become more efficient at the way we do operations and support these run activities, well, then we can divert that money and spend it on new build, and therefore support the business better. Right? I'm sure you've heard that. Some of the older people in the room have probably heard this story many times, and it never works out because most organizations don't want to change their behavior. They often go for these small, these narrowly focused strategies like Agile software development, and they'll focus on getting better at build. So if I become, say 50% better at build, well, that's great, but it's not nowhere near as good as if I become more effective at IT in general, right? So let's start looking at the bigger picture, and we got a much better chance at being able to put money into the things that we would really like to do more often. So that's the basic idea here. So what does this look like? So there's many aspects of planning. How do we manage people? So all this HR stuff. How do we do portfolio management, program management, enterprise architecture? Here's one of the great fantasies of the IT world: reuse engineering. I'm sure you've heard stories for decades now about let's get better at reuse. Let's do product line development, all that sort of stuff, right? In most organizations, this is pure fantasy. Most reuse is done at the copy and paste level. You might be invoking some web services, and that's about it. You're reusing the occasional template, and that's about it, right? Very low levels of reuse. And the challenge with reuse engineering, it's a phenomenally good idea, but if you don't have your act together at architecture, if you don't have good people with the skills to reuse things, then you're probably in serious trouble. So these reuse engineering efforts almost always fail. Oh, and then what happens too, you get your financial people involved, and they'll put some wacky chargeback scheme, right? So we got to pay for the reuse effort, so we're going to charge you to reuse things, and then suddenly nobody is going to reuse anything because they got to pay for it, right? So the business people, once again, messing you up, setting you up for failure because they don't understand what your behavior is going to be, all that good sort of stuff. And then we have build, all the cool things we like talking about. Now, Dad takes on these four things, but we also recognize that you're still going to have some traditional teams, perhaps, and some RUP teams and other teams, and that's okay. Do what you want. And then finally, in Run, we've got basic things like how do we operate our systems? How do we support our systems? How do we do continuous improvement across these teams? Yes, it's great that Agile teams are doing retrospectives, but if I've got like 30 Agile teams, does it really make sense for all 30 Agile teams to figure out that test-driven development's a good idea? Wouldn't it be nice if like 2 or 3 teams figured that out and then shared that learning with everybody else, so that way everybody else doesn't have to figure it out on their own as well? Doesn't that make a little bit sense? So we can be a little bit smarter about the way we work. And yes, that evil word, governance, I'm a firm believer, yes, we are in fact being governed, and I would like to be governed effectively. So I'm going to work with senior management to help them understand what it means to actually govern us effectively. Because if you want to kill an Agile team, force them to go through your traditional governance processes. And you're in trouble if senior management is saying, well, we have a governance process that's paradigm neutral, that applies to all projects. One size does not fit all. Okay, I've got large feet, So if you everybody's socks that are so I can't buy one size fit all socks. For example, they only go up to about size 11, and I got larger feet than that. So anyways, so one size does not fit all. Now some weird thing about my feet. Anyways, so many organizations are talking about this this wild new concept called DevOps. And DevOps is all about how do we streamline development and operations? How do we get them working together effectively? And this is important from an agile organization point of view, is because we got it's part of the big picture. It's not the entire picture, but it's part of the big picture. So going against this model that I just described, what does DevOps look like? Well, some people will tell you it's continuous delivery. Like a lot of the rhetoric in the Agile community is all about let's do continuous delivery. Let's get better at getting things into production quicker. Okay, that's good, but isn't that just dev? That's just dev. It's not DevOps. It's dev. It's good. It's important. I like it, but it's just dev. So if you want to talk about DevOps, should we not involve operations and support? Should we not get better at release management as well, right? So that might be DevOps. But shouldn't we streamline all of build and all of run? So that might be DevOps, right? So depending on what your vision is, what your scope is of your discussion, and what the vendor is trying to sell you or the consulting company is trying to sell you, you might have very different definitions of DevOps. I would argue that if we're really interested in DevOps, if we're really interested in streamlining dev and operations, I've really got to be streamlining all of the build stuff and all of the run stuff. That's what it's really all about. And that's a hard problem. It's an important problem to solve, but I'm not going to tell you that it's easy, because look at all the stuff you got to touch, right? Look at all the look at all the people you got to get working together in an effective and coherent manner. That's not easy. So anyways, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? What does Agile at scale look like? Most people think it's large teams. Well, that's nice, but is it just scaling Scrum? There's several of the two most popular Agile scaling frameworks out there right now. It's all about let's scale Agile and Scrum. Let's just scale Scrum. Well, that's nice, but we know there's more to it than that. So should we not also be scaling Lean and other things like that? And should we not really be scaling? Should it not mean scaling everything? Let's have the entire IT department doing Agile, not just big Agile teams, but all of IT doing Agile or Lean. Wouldn't that be nice? So isn't that really what Agile at scale should be all about? And that is a hard freaking problem to solve. Because all it takes is one of those groups to not be Agile, and you've thrown the sand into the gears. And very few organizations can pull this off. Or choose to pull this off, I should say. They could. They choose not to. So there's no one right answer for doing all this. You need to be flexible. So what is disciplined Agile delivery all about? What does it mean to deliver, to work in an enterprise setting in an Agile manner? So this is the problem that the disciplined Agile delivery framework was initially put together to solve. And so first of all, this is not a methodology. It's a process decision framework. It's based on this observation that we are constantly making important process decisions. We might not understand that. We might not explicitly know we're doing it, but we are, in fact, making process decisions. We are, in fact, making organization decisions all the time. So wouldn't it be good if we knew what those decisions were and we're making good decisions based on the situation we find ourselves in? So different teams in different situations will make different decisions, and rightfully so. So there's several different aspects of what DAD's all about. It's all people-oriented, learning-oriented. It's solution-focused. We support several life cycles. Here's a mind-blowing thing that we'll see in a second. It's a hybrid because there's a bunch of great material out there. One of the great sadnesses in this industry right now is the fact that we have this generation of people who are unable to search online anymore, it seems. They're unable to read or find the good ideas from the 70s and 80s and 90s and even now in the early 2000s that were published years ago, because they don't even have the language anymore to search. So for example, in Scrum, they have this practice called backlog grooming, or backlog refinement now, because they realized that grooming was a goofy term. So you've got all these people, all these Scrum guys, all they can talk about is grooming or backlog refinement, which is great. But what they're really doing is planning and modeling. But if you don't know that, if you don't have the background to understand that, how the heck can you, if you search on backlog grooming or backlog refinement, you get a much different search result than if you search on, say, agile modeling techniques or agile planning techniques. So if you don't even know the terminology anymore, you can't find the older material, which is still relevant, right? So, we've got to respect the fact that, the older people among us were doing some, mission critical rock and roll stuff in the day, and they actually knew what they were doing. So wouldn't it be nice to leverage that? So anyways, we try to normalize some of the terminology as well. So DAD focuses on the development aspects, the delivery aspects of build. One of the things that we talk about is we support a full life cycle, not just construction. So at a very high level, this is more of a system or a delivery life cycle where we have some sort of initial conceptualization. We've got to, from a team point of view, a project team point of view, or a product team point of view, we've got to kick it off somehow. We've got to do some project initiation. Roughly 90% of all Agile teams do upfront architecture, they do upfront planning, they do upfront requirements. So this is easy to observe if you choose to. What's also interesting is the average Agile team spends about a month doing this project initiation or project inception stuff. The average Agile team has 2-week-long sprints or iterations. So when people talk about inception or this project initiation stuff being sprint 0, they're really not being accurate. It's really 2 sprints, sprint -1 and sprint 0. And the fact that we're having to count backwards from 1 tells us they didn't really think things through. They weren't being empirical. They weren't observing what people were actually doing. It was all wishful thinking. Then we have transition or release or deployment, whatever you want to call that. The average Agile team spends about a month doing that. The really good teams spend hours or minutes doing transition, but the average Agile team spends about a month. Once again, it's not a hardening sprint or whatever you want to call that. It's 2 sprints, not 1. So let's be honest in what we're doing. And so these are really our phases. They're not just sprints. So Agile development is actually serial in the large. We have some sort of a start, inception, initiation thing. We do construction, and we have some sort of deployment transition thing. And eventually we go into production. The average Agile team, 75% of all Agile teams are working on the new release of an existing system. So they're working on release 17, and release 16 is already up and running in production. So as a result, they're getting change requests coming in from their users, new requirements. Sometimes it's defect reports, sometimes it's just an enhancement request. But the vast majority of Agile teams are in this situation. So let's make this an explicit part of the process. Let's build it right in, because we're all dealing, the vast majority of us are dealing with this. So let's take the mystery out of the life cycle. Let's take the mystery out of how things work and what we're actually doing. So one of the life cycles, and I appreciate how hard this slide is to read. I'm going to make the slides available on the website, so you can download all these slides if you want. But this is the Scrum-based life cycle. So in any decent-sized organization, you'll see some teams that are doing some sort of a Scrum-based thing, and it's far more than just what the Scrum guys talk about, because we got all this inception stuff and transition, got a little bit of aspects of governance going on down there, keeping it all lightweight, I would hope. Some teams are doing some more of a lean startup or exploratory thing. In many ways, this is a replacement to the inception phase. You would do this when you're in a situation where your stakeholders really don't know what they want. It's all based on the work of Eric Ries, and it's about more than just doing lean startups. Banks are doing this. Insurance companies are doing this now. When they've got new products and they don't really know what, they got an idea for a new product, I should say. They don't really know what the marketplace wants. Instead of going off in a fantasy land for 2 or 3 years, building some big, huge thing and then releasing it and hoping that it works, instead they're doing small little experiments and seeing what the marketplace actually wants. We have some teams working in a lean manner. I understand there's at least 1 or 2 Kanban talks today. So in most organizations that I work with, they've got some Scrum teams, they've got some Scrumish type teams, they've got some lean type teams, they've even got some continuous delivery teams. So if you keep your teams together, you can move from this environment where you've got these transition phases of several weeks or sometimes even several months if you don't really have your act together in release management yet. And because they keep the team together, because they automate the heck out of everything, the transition phase becomes an activity on the order of minutes or hours. So all these organizations that we hear about that are releasing their production many times a day or releasing weekly, the only way they can pull that off is through automation, doing continuous deployment and continuous regression testing and continuous integration and all these good sorts of things. So different teams working in different ways. Now, from a management point of view, let's take it up a notch. In your organization, you've probably got some team, you got some Scrum teams, some Kanban teams, some teams doing continuous delivery, some teams doing other stuff, non-Agile stuff, and that's okay. So you got to keep an eye on all these sorts of things. So all these frameworks that depend on everybody doing Scrum, incredibly freaking naive. It's not the case. It's simply, empirically, observably not the case that most organizations are working this way. Most organizations have different teams doing different things, and rightfully so. So the fact that we're all working in different ways is absolutely brutal from a process framework point of view. How the heck do you describe this? So this is a problem that we struggled with on my team at IBM when we were putting the framework together. How the heck do you describe it depends, right? Because it's the consultant answer. Well, how are we going to do this? Well, it depends. Depends on your situation. Well, that's not the best advice for somebody looking for a concrete answer. So we observe that even though all these teams are working in different ways, they're achieving the same sorts of goals. They need to have the same sorts of capabilities. So when we do inception, everybody's got to do basic things like put the team together, do some initial requirements modeling, do some initial planning, do some initial architecture modeling, get funding, so secure funding for the project. When they're doing construction, they got to produce potentially shippable software, or better yet, potentially consumable solutions. They're hopefully paying down technical debt by improving quality. If they're smart, they prove the architecture early. Towards the end of the life cycle, they got to ensure that the solution is consumable, that it's ready to ship, and then they got to ship it. Basic stuff. All throughout the project, they should be growing their team members. They've got to coordinate within the team and with other teams. They've got to do, hopefully, they're going to be doing some sort of risk management type stuff. Right? So they got to be smart about this sort of stuff. When they're through a very interesting phenomenon in the Agile community is around non-functional requirements. So if you're doing non-functionals like security requirements or usability or reliability or availability, take any word and put ility on the end of it. There's dozens of categories of non-functional requirements. They've got to do some initial, first of all, initially address them by doing some initial requirements modeling, but in their architecture, they got to think through some of these requirements. I'm not saying they got to build it all, but they should at least think through how security is going to get addressed and think through how availability is going to be addressed and reliability and that good sort of stuff. And then throughout construction, they've got to implement it. And that'll affect their testing, it'll affect their way they do design, and so on. So we've got to, let's take the mystery out of this. Let's build this right into the process. It's amazing how many Agile teams still struggle with dealing with basic non-functional requirements. And it doesn't have to be, right? But the problem is when you don't have an inception phase, when you don't look at the technical issues as well as the management issues, then suddenly non-functional requirements become a complex topic, amongst many complex topics. So this is what's called a mind map. So there's 22 goals here describing what you might want to do when you're taking a full project or product team view of the Agile universe. And each one of these goals in turn breaks up into other things. So this is what we call a goal diagram. This is basically extending the mind map, because if you were to mind map all of Agile development, you'd get this mind map with a couple thousand options on it, which is basically useless. But anyway, so when we're trying to secure funding, we got to think about two things: how are we going to actually fund the project or fund the team, and how are we going to get access to that money? How hard is it to get permission? In some organizations, we just go and it's an informal request. We got an idea. Okay, give me some money. In other organizations, it's a 3-month process because you got to get sign off and all that good sort of stuff. In other organizations, I've actually literally worked in companies where their response is, why are you wasting your time doing budgeting? Just start working, because money is not our problem. Companies like Google, they got so much money they don't know what to do with it. So why would you invest? Why would you waste? But they desperately want to get things out to market. So why would you waste your time budgeting when instead you could be investing that effort to get stuff out the door quicker, right? So these sorts of organizations, different organizations have different priorities. Some organizations, their priority of budgeting is not quite there. Other organizations, which are tight for money, end up spending a lot of money trying to figure out how they're going to spend their money. Very strange, but this is the way the world works. There's different approaches to doing initial scoping. We might want to think about how much detail we go into. We might want to think about what types of views. So it's about more than just doing user stories. Sorry to say. There's different ways we can approach modeling. There's different ways that we can manage our work items. The Scrum product backlog is one of several. In those life cycle diagrams, we saw several different ways that those teams, now I appreciate I went quickly, but there's several different ways that those teams are managing requirements. So the lean, the Kanban folks manage requirements in a different way than the Scrum folks, rightfully so. And there's trade-offs to those different approaches. So there's no such thing as a best practice. There's advantages and disadvantages to all these techniques. So, so when we take a look at work item management, so those 5 different techniques, not doing no management whatsoever is an option. But there's advantages and disadvantages to all those techniques. Choose the one that's best for your situation. So my team might make a different decision than your team because we're in different situations. So this is what these goal diagrams are all about. Help my team, because my team is not a bunch of process experts. Your team is not a bunch of process experts. And yet you still have to make process decisions. So when we're figuring out how we're going to address the initial scope on my project, my team will make a different set of decisions than your team will. And if we don't want to make any decisions at all, we just want to start working, these bolded options are good starting points. So if you don't do no thinking whatsoever, just tell me what to do, then we can help you with that. When we're building our potentially consumable solution or potentially shippable software, there's a bunch of different techniques we might want to think. So how are we going to go about programming? How are we going to go about exploring requirements on a just-in-time basis? How are we going to go about exploring the design on a just-in-time basis? How are we going to go about planning on a just-in-time basis? How are we going to go about assuring that we're actually building something that's consumable? Because it's about more than just being shippable. We actually want to ship things that people want to buy or people want to use. So, when people start talking about potentially shippable software, they really don't know what they're talking about. You don't want to ship crap. Anybody can ship crap. I want to ship stuff that people will pay me for. I make more money that way. This is probably a good thing for me. So we want to make things that are consumable. So we can up our game a bit. And we've got different options. And they're all good options depending on your situation. We want to be enterprise aware. This is the basic observation that my team is not the only team in the company, that we've got different development teams in flight that I might have dependencies on, that I might have to work with. I've got to work with the governance people. If we're lucky enough to have an enterprise architecture group, I want to leverage that. If we're lucky enough to have a reuse engineering group, I want to get help reusing things. If I'm lucky enough to have a data management group, I want to get help with my database stuff, and so on. So I need to work with these teams in an effective manner. I get really worried when I hear about this rhetoric of, well, the Scrum Master's job is to protect us from the rest of the organization. What a stupid thing to do. That's just stupid. I want to work with the rest of the organization. I want to leverage the rest of the organization. If I can get some good advice from the enterprise architects of how to build things, I can speed things up. If I can get some good advice from them or from the reuse folks of what I can reuse, that way I don't have to reinvent the wheel, that means I've got better return on investment. If I can work with the data management group to work more effectively with some legacy data sources, that means I can speed things up. I don't have to create a brand new database, which takes overall quality in my organization down. We can work smarter, not harder. So I don't want a Scrum Master running around protecting me from the rest of the organization. I want a team lead that's out there helping me work effectively with the rest of the organization. And that sometimes might mean that we need to work with them to help them become more agile, because if my data management group is not so agile right now, that doesn't mean that I avoid them. It means that I step up as a good corporate citizen and help them to learn how to be more effective. Because from an organizational point of view, this is probably the most important thing I could do. Governance is built right in. I've talked about that. So just to sort of wrap things up here, I started late, so I'm going to end late, but I'll try to stay. I will stay within my hour. Right now, so Dad up until this point has been focused on build. For the last year or two, we've been working with customers on this plan and run stuff as well, and we're just about to publish because we're firm believers in test driving things before we publish them. We want to see, we're empirical. We watch, we observe what works and what doesn't work in practice, and then we share. So we're just about to share our learnings around what's working in the plan and run space. So this is a work in progress thing, but this is, how do you approach enterprise architecture from an agile point of view? It's the same sort of basic goal diagram approach. What are my options? How can I be effective in enterprise architecture? How can I be effective in operations? Now there's some good ITIL stuff in there, but there's also some basic DevOps. How do we be lean when we're operating our systems? Reuse engineering as well, and as I said earlier, it's very difficult to be effective at reuse engineering. But the organizations that are doing some basic things that aren't always obvious of what to do. So anyways, so I just want to make you aware that we are looking and that we are about to publish all this good sort of stuff to how do you actually scale Agile to the IT setting. So our claim is that the DAD framework provides a solid foundation from which to scale. Fundamentally, if you don't know how to do Agile in simple situations, how the heck could you possibly do it in these more complex situations? How the heck could you scale Agile to your IT organization if you don't know how to pull off things like this and more? Like this is just 3 of the 7 or 8 process blades there, right? So we've got to get good. We've got to be agile at all of these topics, not just software development. So our claim is that DAD provides this foundation from which to scale, provides this advice for all the groups within IT of how they could possibly work in an agile manner, making their options available to them and making the trade-offs explicit. So some realities from transformation. I find a lot of organizations will start out with this sort of a strategy. Their plan is that they're going to, they'll start with some pilot projects, they'll start releasing to several development teams, and eventually they'll transform the entire organization by having all their agile team or all their teams agile, or at least the majority of them agile. And that's a wonderful, wonderful fantasy. But what often happens is they run a few pilot projects, they'll staff it with their better people, they'll cherry pick the projects, so they set themselves up for success, which is a good thing. And they start rolling out to some teams, and they get it out to a few teams, but eventually it blows up on them. And it's because they're only looking at development. So we've observed in my company, working with organizations around the world, that it's a different story. Not only do we have software development teams that we have to transform, we've also got to transform these IT level teams as well. So what happens is when we start becoming agile on this development team, well, because this development team should be working with the enterprise architects, they should be working with the data folks, they're being governed, that some people on the enterprise architecture team now needs to be able to work in an agile manner. And when we start rolling it out to more and more development teams, the implication is that more and more of the enterprise architects need to be agile, more and more of the governance needs to be agile, more and more of the data management needs to be agile, and so on, right? Pretty basic, obvious stuff, if you choose to step back and observe. And then eventually, if we're truly successful rolling out across all teams, then eventually all the IT level teams will also be agile. Now the challenge is it might take me a couple months to really transform a development team to become agile, but it's going to take several years for these teams because these teams have to go at the rate of the overall program. Because the challenge if you're an enterprise architect is that, yeah, I need to work with the agile teams in an agile manner, but if I've got 20 traditional teams still, then I have to work with those 20 other teams in a traditional manner. So as an enterprise architect, my time frame is many years. As a developer, my time frame to transition is many months. 2 completely different cadences, 2 completely different time frames on that one. And this is one of the reasons why the agile transformations are sort of struggling in many organizations, is because they don't recognize that we've got these different time frames. And they often don't even recognize that these groups need to transition. So that's a more serious problem in and of itself. So your transformation strategy also needs to address all 3 things. They need to address people, it needs to address processes, it needs to address tools, the old 1980s PPT type stuff. All 3 of these categories are important, and all 3 of these categories need to be addressed in parallel. I find too many people, the Agile community sort of suffers from the warm and fuzzy stuff. Let's focus on people, collaboration, blah, blah, blah. It's not just that. So some data from industry. We ran a survey earlier on this year, going to the Agile community itself and asking them, have you had an Agile, has your organization transitioned or mostly transitioned to Agile? If so, we asked you a series of questions. And one of the series of questions we asked you was, how hard was addressing all of these things? And what was interesting is that the people, so the top 3 most complicated things were either people and process. And what's interesting is that adopting the Agile technical practices, like continuous integration, TDD, and others, was the second most hardest thing to do. Adopting all the Scrum stuff, the management stuff, was the easy stuff. Hold a daily stand-up meeting. Wow, that's a hard practice to adopt. Hold a demo every 2 weeks. Wow, that's really difficult too, right? Come on, I can train my dog to do stuff like that. I can't train my dog to do continuous integration. Okay, so we've got to focus on that. And even adopting the tools can be a little bit hard too. Change the culture, change the business culture was number one, changing the IT culture was number three. So these people type issues. And then we asked, and this is more of a measure of the rhetoric in the industry, how important were these things? So changing the culture, it was still number one and number three, respectively, so same sort of results as difficulty. But everybody told us that doing the management practices was uber important because of the marketing. You're told that it's important. You're being certified in it. Oh, it must be important. And yet, it's not very hard to do. Easy to do and important. Generally, those two things don't go hand in hand. Important things are almost always hard. So, but anyways, I'm not knocking it. Obviously, you've got to change management, but you've also got to be doing the other things as well. So anyways, that's just some data that you might be interested in. So get coaching, get training, get mentoring. Expect this to take a long time. Agile transformations are going to take, for large organizations, it's going to take many years. This is actually one of the things the CMMI community got right. We can ding CMMI for as much as we want, but they were blatantly clear that this cultural transformation, these agile process transformations take many, many, many years. It's not several weeks. It's not like do a 30-day agile boot camp type stuff. That might get a team going. It certainly won't transform your organization. So just to wrap up, the story I told. Agile delivery is important. It's sort of the core. And this has been the focus of the Agile community for a long, long time. How do we get good at Agile software development? That's a good story. But we need to start expanding our horizons. We need to figure out Agile IT. How does it all fit together? How does my IT department serve the business? How does my IT department effectively work in a reactive, in a quick manner that enables the business to do whatever the business wants to do? And the business needs to change too. They need to change their expectations. They need to be prepared to work with us in an agile and a lean manner. They need to be prepared to step up and be actively involved with us. In that way, they can achieve these real business benefits that we've been talking about for years now. So, in parting, your organization is unique. Your team is unique. Beware of these prescriptive approaches. Think for yourself. Observe for yourself. Be prepared to go looking, think outside of the Scrum or the Kanban box and go looking at this wealth of material out there. Look at the Agile modeling stuff, the Agile data stuff, the stuff coming from the DSDM community, the stuff coming from the outside in development community. There's many, many sources of great information out there. So really, start thinking outside of the box and start helping your coworkers and help yourself to learn from each other. Spend the time to go to conferences like this and get coaching and mentoring. Be prepared to tailor. One size does not fit all. I think it's blatantly obvious that larger teams will work differently than smaller teams. Beware of this repeatable process mantra that we used to hear from the CMMI community. Our stakeholders, our business people, don't want repeatable processes. They want repeatable results. They want solutions that meet their needs. They want solutions that are delivered in a timely manner. Hopefully, yesterday. They want to spend the money wisely. Hopefully, not very much. They want quality. That's what they want. They don't care what processes you're following. That's generally not of interest to many people. They want the results. They want repeatable results from you. They don't want repeatable practices from you, or repeatable processes. So one size really does not fit all. So remember my feet. Anyway, so thank you very much. Thank you. Do I have time for, I realize we're running late, do I have time for questions?
Sure.
Okay, is there a question or two? I'm happy to take questions if anybody has them. Or answers. Answers are often better than questions sometimes. Question right there. Just shout.
In one of these two slides at the end, you said that the most important but yet the most difficult thing is changing your business.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is adopting agile technical practices. The second one is relatively easy to understand. It's continuous integration and other stuff.
Yeah.
But can you just briefly elaborate with number one? What would that actually be? Because this is quite generic title for those.
Yeah, and there was more detailed questions, than this. This is a summary. So yeah, so changing the business culture is things like flexible approaches to budgeting, being the business stakeholders being available to work with the teams. In most organizations I work in, the biggest problem is the business stakeholders making the time to be available to attend demos, to provide requirements, to see what you've done and provide feedback. Because they're busy people. I'm working with one company right now where the person that should be the chief product owner actually does literally business deals on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars. So when somebody does, and they do, several of them a year. So when their focus is on several $100 million deals, convincing them to spend several hours with you to work on a $200,000 IT project, it's not even a round-off error for them, right? It's like, why am I wasting my time with these IT nerds? Just build a freaking system. And yet what they don't realize is that if they don't provide the requirements and they don't work closely with the IT people, then we can't possibly build solutions that meet their needs. So getting to change that culture and finding ways to get to make time available, because it's hard, right? Because this is a hard decision. Take time away from your $100 million deal to work with me to help you make $100 million deals in the future. That is a very hard trade-off to make. So it's stuff like that, and doing it across the business. All the issues around HR. The HR issues in IT is almost always a bit of a disaster. How do you hire people? How do you bring them in? How do you reward people? Very, very interesting topics. They're soft topics, but they're very hard to deal with. So it's all these sorts of issues. It's a very good question. One more, perhaps? That gentleman there.
Hello, I'm Faz speaking from Istanbul. Now I'm also working for a large corporate as a consultant.
Okay.
In my experiences, I saw that I do have experience in finance industry, telco industry, but now I'm working in telco industry. Corporates are building up, let's say, separate agile group,
Yeah.
and they are dedicating, let's say, product owner from the business department. But I cannot say that they are in the way to transform all the enterprise culture into an agile way. So whenever they are, let's say, dedicating a product owner from the business department and with a, let's say, dedicated budget, I'm quite sure that they are not assigning, let's say, the best business people, or let's say...
Because their culture hasn't changed. Yeah. They don't understand the implications of that decision.
Because their valuable business consultants are still ongoing in their legacy way.
Yep.
So, and this is an ongoing event. While Agile is basically initiated by the IT software development departments, and the power of IT is not like the power of the business, because the main business is finance, or let's say communications, it's not the IT.
Yeah.
How is it possible to overcome, let's say, such kind of circumstances?
It's an education issue. It's a communication issue. So the question, if you didn't hear it, was around the main goal of the business is not to do IT, it's to do finance or telecom or whatever your line of business is. So first of all, IT is part of the business. So it's not good to talk about IT in the business. We should really be talking about we're all part of the business. But the challenge we've got is that the business people are often very good at finance. They're very good at marketing, whatever it is that they do, and they often don't understand the implications of IT. And so we need to push back against that. So they need to understand, first of all, that IT is an important part of the business, and it's the only part of the business that's going to enable them to become more effective at whatever line of business that they're in, and that they need to work with us, and they need to understand the implications of doing so. So this is an education thing, but it's also an education for them. It's also an education for us. So if I work for a financial company, I should understand the fundamentals of finance. If I work for a telecom, I should understand the fundamentals of telecom. Because if I don't, I can't possibly have an intelligent, coherent discussion with the business people who are focused on doing telecom. So we need to get better at and we need to understand the importance of having domain skills and domain knowledge, but at the same time, they need to understand that they need to come up to speed in IT, and this is something that's generally not taught in the universities. It's something that's generally not discussed well in Business Week or Fortune or Forbes. So we've got a very serious problem there, a very serious challenge, which we have to overcome. So don't give up on it. So earlier I was using the example of the business folks want us to do tell me what the budget's going to be, tell me what the schedule's going to be, tell me and then let's have a defined scope, and then boom, bad idea. But if I just sit there and take that, if I accept that as an IT professional, I'm going to continue to get it. On the next project, the business people are going to ask for the same stupid decision. Right? So I should push back. I should say, well, wait a minute. When you ask for these things, this is what's going to happen. When you give me a product owner that really isn't up to speed on the business, this is what's going to happen. When you do this, here's the results. Is this what you really want? So we've got to educate them. And so we've got to be willing to step up and do that, which means we also need to educate ourselves. So anyways, thank you very much. And let's wrap this up. I'll be around all day, so if you got other questions, don't be shy. Come and grab me and have a conversation. Oh, yes. And 1 second. And I realize that it's very last minute, but we are running a 2-day Discipline Agile Delivery workshop on Tuesday and Wednesday, which you can still sign up for. So if you go to the front desk, it's still possible to sign up for it. So I thought I'd share that with you. And I realize how last minute that information is, but at least you got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank
Very
you.
good
My
one.
pleasure. Oh, great. Thank you.
Sarajevo.
Oh, yeah.
Number for you.
Thanks.
Thanks.